Now let's talk about holding the sprint retrospective. At the sprint retrospective, you're going to get the product owner in there, the development team, and the Scrum Master. Some people might debate about the product owner being in there, but this is something for the entire Scrum team, so they are definitely part of the team and have a say in how the process goes. So you definitely want to have them in there. When you hold the sprint retrospective, there's a couple of qualities that you want to strive for. You want to make sure people have an equal voice. You don't want to have people shouting other people down or acting in a way that makes people not want to say what they actually feel. We'll talk about some techniques for that in a second. Focus on improvement. It's too easy to say, that sucked. Well, that doesn't help us. What was wrong and what can we improve? You need to be careful on how you phrase your questions and also how we phrase our answers. Things are always about improving the process. You want to prioritize, usually by some kind of voting with the team. Sometimes there'll be people who have pet peeves and constantly bring things up, but the entire team really doesn't feel that way. And so you may want to take that offline and resolve that as a Scrum Master yourself with one-on-one. It's not something for the entire team to circle around because they don't all think it's the same problem. And you also want to take real action. A lot of times I've seen retrospectives become a diluted thing because nothing's ever done. And people complain, we talk about this over and over again and nothing ever changes. Some things are really hard to change, so they take a long time. But if you're not doing any kind of action that the people can see, this becomes a useless enterprise. So you want to make sure you do things like talk about what we're going to stop doing, what we're going to start doing, things that we want to keep on doing. That's a good technique for identifying actual action you will take. And it's not bad to review that at the beginning of the sprint as well, to talk about what did we say we were going to do and did we actually do it and has it improved. One technique I like to do, especially with a co-located team, is using the tactileness of cards and poker chips. What I'll usually do is I'll have a table set up with one end is the what went well end, and another end is the what could be better. Everybody gets about 10 minutes to write down on cards separate individual items of what they think went well, what could have gone better. I'll collect them all up as a Scrum Master, and then I'll read them out loud, making sure I clarify anything if people don't understand what we meant. And then I'll place them down on the actual table. And I'll group things together. So we see better idea of what to work on. I like the task board. And we might discuss, we think that's around the same problem or good thing. So I'll put those together. Same thing with what could be better. So we see here a lot of people talking about testing, so I group all those together. So what we've done so far is an equal voice. By having everybody write down their cards and me reading them out loud, nobody gets to shout down anybody else. Everybody gets their own things put out there on equal footing with everybody else. Then, by putting them together in stacks of things that are similar, there's already some implicit voting there. If 5 different cards show up for unit testing, there's a good chance that that's one of our high priority items. Everybody thought about the same thing. Then I'm going to actually give people poker chips. And you might give them 4 or 2, depending on how you want to do it and how big your team is. And they get to go place their poker chips on the things that they most want to discuss. So everybody goes around and places this, and it gets people up and moving around. It's also another form of voting. So you can see here that lots of people on top of unit testing put their poker chips. So not only did we have a lot of cards about it, everybody pretty much voted that as their top priority thing. You'll notice the daily Scrum being too long got no votes. The person who brought it up probably when he saw it amongst everybody else's said, you know, that's not as important as all these other things. So implicitly, everybody's determining what they need to work on at the highest priority. Then you want to discuss that option before you move on to the next option and make sure you actually have real action coming from that. I'd like to take a minute to talk about distributed retrospectives. This is such an interactive session. It's really hard to do when you're in separate states, separate cities, or across time zones. So let's talk about some techniques to try to keep equal voice, focus on improvement, and voting. One thing you don't want to do is just open up a conference call. Those are just hard to hear people. It's hard to understand. People are away from the microphone. And when people are just going one by one and stating things, that's not an equal voice. If somebody on one side of the conference call who's seen as a senior person says, I think unit testing went really well, and then a junior person on the other end of the call hasn't spoken yet, and they don't think it went very well, they may be intimidated. They may not want to say that I don't think that went well, and I think you're wrong. Don't have an equal voice in that matter. It's hard to do voting. So if you're just saying things out loud and not recording them and not giving people a chance to vote on them, that's not a way to prioritize. So techniques for this, you may want to have people submit things beforehand through email or in a Google Doc, something like that. I find it best to send it to the Scrum Master, have them aggregate it, so then it's an equal voice. You don't know where things came from. They'll put them in a Google Doc or in some other shared tool, and then that list is there and you can review that. That way nobody is shouting down anybody else. Then for the voting, if it's in a Google Doc, add another column and people can go put their initials for their votes. Otherwise, there's tools like Edistorm, which actually simulate the tabletop, and you can put cards on there and give people a number of votes, and they can go vote on things. It emulates that metaphor very well. But the key is to make sure equal voice, some type of voting, and a focus on improvement. So once we're done with the Sprint Retro, we've actually completed all the prescribed ceremonies, and we're ready to rinse and repeat the whole process. You walk out of your retro, you can immediately go into your sprint planning and start talking about the next sprint. I do want to caution about going directly from one sprint to the next sprint. You want to be careful in that it doesn't become Chinese water torture, where constantly delivering, they don't get to come up for air. You want to have a sustainable pace, but you also want to give people some time to relax and do some research and those type of things. So we've introduced the concept of a slack day. Not a great term because management doesn't like it, but the idea is great. It means that between that time of when we stop a sprint and start a sprint, whether it's half a day, a full day, whatever makes sense for you, that's time for people to go work on side projects, work together on innovating, all these type of things. And it does a lot of great things for you. It gives you that kind of break. It gives you a time to feel less pressured to get things out. You can work on other interesting work that may actually become beneficial to the team later. And it gives you that ability to set a pace that's sustainable. Because during the sprint, there is a lot of pressure to be delivering those things at the end. And we want to make sure that there is a time where you can relax and take care of yourself.